I've got one slide here talking a little bit about the Fisher Creek mitigation plan, just to kind of bring everyone up to speed. As Mike mentioned, there is no mechanism to mitigate for your water use right now, no approved method. So they are starting with Fisher Creek. They're spending thousands of dollars to do so. And the first thing we need to point out is this is where the Upper Skagit is trying to lend a helping hand. They are trying to come forward, and they are the official sponsor of the plan. They're working with Mentor Law Group, Department of Ecology, and a number of other individuals to try and find a plan for people to be able to build. Yeah.
I'd like to interject right here that Jackie Klug responded to me by email that even if you had water in an exempt well prior to 2001, you have to be able to prove to ecology that you were using that water. And they have no records or protocol or measures or criterion for establishing use catch dam.
That's more good news.
It's not just 2001 counts.
Okay. So once again, this mitigation plan is sponsored by the Upper Skagit, and something that's come out of this is, in which I advise everyone to get involved in these, because this is a pilot project and it could potentially go to your neighborhood soon. What they found is that the 50-year projected impact is 9.3 gallons per minute. It's equivalent to a garden hose. So it's a little frustrating to see that thousands of dollars have gone into studies, thousands of dollars are going into purchasing land, and we're not even at the point yet where people can build. So there's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent here. So this is where we bring up enhancement versus mitigation. What kind of evolved from one of the last meetings we were at is that it really kind of sprung up that, hey, we're enhancing stream flow. We're not really mitigating much here because they've noted spot flow in the tributaries up there. So there's dry parts of the tributaries during the dry parts of the year, which makes perfect sense. So the impairment is not due to well use. There already is no water, so there's no additional impairment to occur. And the taxpayers are being asked to pay for this enhancement. A bunch of other things evolved from it, and I'm going to keep this slide short, but at the end of it, the Upper Skagit's tribe, David Hawkins, said, we are in an absurd environment. We're trying to bring a rational solution to an irrational problem. And I think what we need to be asking and demanding from ecology is that they need to fix the irrational problem.
Thank you, Zachary and Mike, for this 10 years of insane arithmetic, insane decisions, water issues. I don't see it going away. I've been involved with it for a long time, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. So as I talk to you about people and fish, I hope my comments don't offend anybody. It's not intentional. As my father used to say, if the shoe fits, wear it. And he also used to say, you live your life forward, but you analyze it in the rearview mirror. So having set the stage, bear with me for a short history lesson in the rearview mirror. Now, I'm going to ask you at the end in this story where you think you lost your water right. Why are you here today? And this goes back quite a ways, so bear with me. Visualize 14,000 years ago, ice 3,000 feet deep above Seattle and us here, if we were here. And 13,000 years ago, floodwater almost 800 feet deep in Wenatchee and Pasco. It's unbelievable. Here at home, I'm going to give you a series of dates. 11,000 years ago, 5,100, 2,800, 1,800, 1,100, and 300. We're coming closer to today. Those years before today, lahar mudflows from Glacier Peak filled our valley from Sterling Hill, where the tide used to go, and now to where we are today. And the Skagit River floods continued to fill it and make this valley that we're in. So now we have a problem. Fish were here, and archaeologists tell us people were also here. So people and fish were here. What this tells us and shows us that the valley was and is a living, growing, moving, alive valley. It's still changing. It's not going to stop changing. And whatever we decide today is going to continue to change. A little background, the 1993 Intranco study commissioned by Skagit County with data from C2HM Hill says 10 million tons a year of sediment is the sediment load in the Skagit River, and this is natural. And current agencies say this is natural, and by the way, natural is good. So some of their logic we've already heard and will continue. Things are happening as these dates come forward. The area is being discovered. A few settlers are here. Trappers are arriving. But by and large, before all of you and your ancestors came here, let's call that pre-European, just so we remember. Do you still have your water rights? We'll see. A new era after this period is called post-European settlement. And it's just around the corner. This unbelievable rich little valley, the Skagit Valley and Puget Sound, has been discovered. Now some dates are going to be important here, so listen carefully because the test will be at the end. On November 15th, 1805, Lewis and Clark reached the Pacific Ocean after over 4,000 miles through the wilderness. That was 1805. In 1855, the Swinomish Indian Reservation, amongst others, along with the Point Elliott Treaty, were formed and signed. 1855. On May 20th, 1862, President Lincoln signed the Homestead Act. Go west, young man. Find 160 acres, drive a stake in the ground, take care of it, and pow, it's yours. Unbelievable. 1862. 1863, the year later, Samuel Calhoun hired an Indian guide, left Utsalati on Camano Island, traveled sloughs to Pleasant Ridge, looked out over the valley, west of Mount Vernon, to this unbelievably productive place, and the rest is history, as you know, because the Calhoun Road is named after him there. Settlement continued at an ever-expanding rate. European and new American ideas and traditions became the law of the land for all people, tribal people and white people. Land ownership through fee simple title was enjoyed by natives and settlers alike. They could buy and sell their land on the reservation just like you could. This was accompanied by advantages of land ownership, benefits, rights, and of course, responsibilities. Water law, be it riparian, starting on the East Coast, prior appropriation, or diffused surface water, were enacted. That happened as the country was formed. Washington is a combination state of prior appropriation and riparian. Diffused surface water is never talked about. It should be talked about in your cases, but it's not. Washington had established statehood by now in 1855, and the legislature was very busy. Remember, 1855 was after some of those other things. The common enemy doctrine was enacted in the United States and moved from state to state. Surface waters were now also controlled, and the destructive side of water law joined the beneficial side. Water's not always good. Special taxing districts, including diking, drainage, irrigation, and combinations of those, were being formed around 1892, 93, 94, and 95, 18. So the RCWs, Title 85 and Title 77, and some of those were going in motion. More land was diked and drained and became high-yielding and valuable. Some of the best oat crops in the world were grown in the Skagit Valley, feeding horses from here to Seattle to San Francisco. I could not find the article that I have, but the Indians were diking land just south of the Twin Bridges and were enjoying some of the finest oat crops and intended to continue the process of diking that land as they went forward. I have that article. I could not put it together. I couldn't find it with the exact date, so I apologize for that. Okay. 1905 to 1910, 95% plus of the diking had been done in the valley. It was almost over. The land had been diked. The estuary was very similar to it is today, except the new land outside the dikes being formed by the aforementioned silting of the river. So there's a lot of new land out there that wasn't here then. But by and large, it's kind of the same. Fishing, logging, and farming flourished in the early 1900s. Before long, which is 20 to 30 years, proper management of our renewable resources started to become obvious. We were all human. We were probably making a few mistakes. We'd enjoyed the many benefits of land ownership. As sometimes is the human condition, we had neglected some of our responsibilities. We weren't perfect. We were making a few mistakes. Fish hatcheries were common, but management was lacking. Science was evolving. Replanting of logging areas was beginning, but the same existed there. Science was lacking. Farmland became paved over in the favor of sprawl, and we all know what some of that happened. How could this be? Couldn't we see where we were going? Blame was everywhere, and depending on the setting, fingers pointed the other way. We've heard that. Fingers are pointed all directions. Yet in the 50s and early 60s, 50 to hundreds of boats left LeConner and Hope Island daily, and salmon were slaughtered. My parents used to take us out there. John Wayne's boat used to come there. 60, 70, 80, 100-pound kings were common. By the early 70s, the salmon peak had come and gone. Not just here, but all the way from Canada to the Mexican border. Native Americans who relied on salmon for a livelihood and culture were upset and active in court. Remember the dates. Remember what came first. On July 9th, 1973, the Bolt decision issued by Judge George Bolt allocated 50% of the harvestable salmon to satisfy tribal treaties. Tribal treaties were before a whole bunch of your rights even existed, before statehood. And now they have 50% of the authority. In 1990, Chinook salmon ESU in California, ESU, I'm going to use it a couple times, as evolutionary significant unit in California, were listed as threatened. Over time, the next 10 years, threatened and endangered listings became common up and down the Pacific coast. March 1999, 12 runs of salmon were listed in Puget Sound, threatened and endangered. And I hope as people hear this and think about it, that if I'm wrong on one or two dates, I'm not a historian. I'm just trying to put a logical story together, and I think the sequence is right. And guess what? The blame is everywhere, and the gloves are on. The listing, you still have property rights and water rights. The listing under the ESA Act triggers a limiting factors analysis. So whenever there's an endangered species in the United States, a limiting factors analysis is triggered. Remember the rearview mirror. What happened? How did we get here? The study about what and why did this happen. The listing covered 19 ESUs in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and California. And guess what the reason was? Habitat critical. There's no way in the world, no matter what was driving this, anything all the way up and down the coast could have been associated to anything. You're the poster child as one county in 39 counties in Washington. We've talked about decisions made at the national level and maybe how insane some of those are, and decisions happening in the state of Washington and how insane some of those are. But this listing is critical, is habitat critical. That's the reason. This means almost all land and water in these 4 states, both riparian and hydraulically connected, and now being under review under Section 7 consultation. You know why the county doesn't want to deal with any of this? It's a federal Section 7 consultation of everything bordering riparian land under the endangered species designation. And by the way, the species is co-managed by 2 sovereign nations. And I think, and maybe you are all caught in the crossfire, that one of them is in charge of protecting the other one. So the sovereign nation of the United States of America is in charge of protecting the other sovereign nation, which now has 50% control through the fish, through the Endangered Species Act, of land and water. Do you still have your water rights?
Well, no.
Well, you do just a little bit. In the number 8 ESU, because we don't have to talk about the ones in Sacramento that were listed first and all the other ones, in Puget Sound, this triggered just for us in agriculture, and they said there was basically very small economic impact. The reflooding in this estuary, remember I told you that the estuary was almost all diked by 1905. And the fish did not drop. That's our graph. Now, talk about bad arithmetic. There might be some there because I don't claim to be correct, but somewhere right there in 1970s, the fish dropped. So the fish were there, but we have to reflood 2,700 acres of prime ag land to be reflooded. That's in the number 8 ESU for Puget Sound. After all, even though the land was diked by 1905, if I said, the fish were still here, it must be the size of the estuary, not enough habitat. Furthermore, I will quote from the Federal Register, volume 63, number 45, Monday, March 9th, 1990, page 11,495. Federal Register's big. I quote, overall, the pervasive use of Green River stock through much of the extensive hatchery network that exists in this ESU may reduce the genetic diversity and fitness of naturally spawning populations. I'm not a fish biologist. I'm a living systems person because I'm a farmer and we have to understand living systems. Having said that, I do know that fish return to their native streams and they don't have helicopters or scat to get from point A to point B. So this seems wrong to take fish from that river and put in this river, but and they're admitting it here that maybe they made a mistake, but remember, it was the land. Harvest impacts on Puget Sound Chinook salmon stocks are quite high. Ocean exploitation rates on natural stocks average 56 to 59%. Total exploitation rates average 68 to 83% in the 1982 to 89 brood years. That was from the Pacific Salmon Commission in 1994. Total exploitation rates on the same stocks have exceeded 90%. Pacific Salmon Commission, 1994. Okay. So we've simplified it. It's all about habitat. So what do? We think in this area, we don't know, we're trying to get the numbers together and a list so that you all can tell, 250 million, and estimates vary. We know from other data, and I could have dug farther, but that's not what this is about, 3.3 billion between 1982 and 2001 by the GOA, the General Accounting Office. 3.3 billion. But some people double that. And some people say higher. $6 to $7 billion have been spent on fish. And we still harvest them. And exempt wells are being denied, and flooding farmland is the solution, and unattainable in-stream flow rules are used as science. In 2003, 3 of us farmer and landowners, along with Mike Shelby, the director of the Western Washington Ag Association, went to the University of British Columbia and met with Dr. Carl Walters, known by his peers as one of the best in the world, at least in the top 5 in fishery science. That's his book. Population Dynamics and Adaptive Management of Renewable Resources. He wrote the book. He's the best of the best. After hearing our story in 2003, mind you, he cut to the chase. His message to us was, you're being deceived by poor science and bad arithmetic. I think you're losing them, your water rights, that is. The limiting factors analysis starts with he said, with a population dynamic study over time. Look in the rearview mirror. This includes harvest and production. The model, as I see it, would allow an overlay of the report, and the model would allow an overlay of the natural, man-made cultural and natural events, and dynamic means allowing new data and results of restorative projects to drive cost-benefit analysis. So we would do a study. That's not expensive. He told us then $20,000 or $30,000. And what you then do is overlay events that have happened. I'm going to give you one single event. And I hope I can quote it from page 3, and that is this little book that Zachary has here. And we found this after years of looking. I've printed some of them. It was done by Milo Moore, who was the director of fisheries, lived in LaConner in the 60s. And at that time, the jetty, it's one example of what might have happened, wasn't exempt wells, wasn't in-stream flows. It is so the jetty, that is the connection between, let me get this right for you, between Goat Island and McGlynn Island to divert the Skagit River silt to the south. It changed the chemistry of the entire Swinomish Channel, part of Skagit Bay, and all of Padilla Bay. It was done by the Army Corps. It was finished in 1937. But it is estimated by all salmon buyers that over 500,000 pounds of salmon annually were harvested from the waters of the Swinomish Channel. 500,000 pounds. Another 500,000. Another 500,000 pounds of salmon caught in the Skagit River mouth each year, and inside Deception Pass, salmon traps landed another 1 million pounds annually. That's 2 million pounds that he believed at that point in time was affected, that the jetty affected. And we've tried and tried and tried to get that reanalyzed. But if in fact the population dynamic study shows that drop, if it was an accurate study and it shows the drop, and we can start seeing what happened to the fish, whether we overpopulated or whether the Bolt decision made a difference. I'm not saying that shoe fits or doesn't. I'm just saying that that's what could have happened. Now we're giving horsepower and new information to legislatures and other people to decouple this whole thing. Because right now, with the federal government and the sovereign nation together, the fish are going to win in court every time, and it's not going to be logical today, any more than it was yesterday, any more than it's going to be tomorrow. Having said that, Did the exempt wells, water rights, in-stream flows cause this dramatic change? One of many possibilities, but arithmetic, past, present, and future, must be accurate. If we truly find out why the fish are not here, we can together figure out how we will have the fish. We will have farms, we'll have homes, we'll have wells, and we'll have fish. But I think the only way to decouple this is to go back and figure out what happened. And it has nothing to do with your wells. It has nothing to do with in-stream flow. You know what? I'm a living systems person. I'm going to tell you something. We grew a lot of peas, and I'm a tulip guy, so I'm not going to go right into tulips. We grew a lot of green peas before they left the valley. I was one of the largest growers. And unless we put 475,000 pea seeds per acre, you wouldn't expect a crop. And we put 3,000 pounds of tulip bulbs to the acre. And we are all, in the Lord's creation, put here to survive and progenate. And the fact remains is, the smart biologists of today say the river's full and the escapement is enough. And really, the river will take thousands of more moms and dads with a belly full of eggs and a sack full of sperm to go up there and make baby fish. But right now, when the small percentage of those 5,000 and 6,000 eggs finally makes it back, I don't even know what it is, 1 or 2%, it gets in the river. And we catch them, and we kill them. And I must say that it's a good Catholic confession that I have caught one salmon in the Skagit River when I went fishing with my father in 1961, and it was a humpy. The rest of the fish I caught in Alaska. So having said that, that's my story. Zachary, do I get to tell a joke?
If you want. Yeah, you had a couple in there, I think.
I got to find it, though. You do something, and I'm going to read them.
I'll do something.
I'm going to read them.
I'll just wrap up here. So takeaways from today. Once again, 5,700 landowners, about 600 homeowners, no legal access to water. So those homeowners, you currently can use your well. That's under kind of a pseudo agreement, I guess, between the Swinomish tribe and ecology. Said they can use their water as long as you mitigate for them. They don't have any plan in place yet. Scientifically unsupported, and it's nationally unprecedented. And the devil, if you guys have seen, devil's in the details. This is all based on a narrative. There is no proof. There's no measured proof. It's all theoretical science. And the arithmetic is just plain wrong. The mitigation standards are defying the water cycle, as Mike went through. And all of you are affected by this. Your neighbors, your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And once again, all of the 1996 MOA signers are responsible for this. If you want to find out more, want to help, ask that you continue to get educated. More than anything, educate others. Get active. We have a website, justwateralliance.org. All of the supporting documents, or majority of them, of stuff that we've talked about tonight, is on there. You can download it all. We've got a petition in the back that we started about 6-8 months ago, asking our Washington State Legislature to find a solution for water for landowners here in the Skagit watershed. And ask that you contact those legislators. They need to hear from you. They need to hear more than just from 5 or 10 of us continually. You need to give them a call. Let them know what is going on and how this affects you personally. Let your county commissioners know how this is affecting you and what you expect them to do. Talk to your PUD commissioners. There's something here where, we've talked about it a number of times, everyone's pointing fingers. And often you'll get someone telling you something, but words and actions are two different things. And the reason I say that is that Skagit PUD is hosting Washington State PUD Association in September at the Swinomish Tribal Casino, and they're having Chairman Cladsby speak. And we did voice our concern with that, and they said, no, we're on your side, we want to help you, but obviously we know words and actions are two different things. It's election season, get involved, and we're open to questions now. Oh, and a joke, sorry.
It's a little. I looked for something that was appropriate. A man in a hot air balloon realized he was lost. He reduced altitude and spotted a woman below. He descended a bit more and shouted, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend I would meet him an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The woman below replied, "You were in a hot air balloon, hovering approximately 30 feet above the ground. You were between 40 and 41 degrees north latitude and between 59 and 60 degrees west longitude. You must be an engineer," said the balloonist. "I am," replied the woman. "How did you know?" "Well," answered the balloonist, "everything you told me is technically correct, but I still have no idea what to make of your information. And the fact is, I'm still lost." "Frankly, you've not been much help so far," the woman below responded. "You must be in management or ecology." I'll enter that. I am, replied the balloonist, "but how did you know?" "Well," said the woman, "you don't know where you are or where you are going. You have risen to where you are due to a large quantity of hot air. You made a promise which you have no idea how to keep, and the people beneath you to solve your problems. The fact is, you are exactly in the same position you were in before we met, and now somehow it's my fault."